How to build your confidence after a breakup. So breakups are kind of like going through a grieving process when you lose someone when they died. It's the phase of newness, and not newness in the best way. Newness in terms of things feeling foreign, things feeling different. When you've been in a relationship, you've been used to a routine, and this routine has caused what we all love, which is called comfort. And when this comfort is pulled under you like a rug, it can be tough getting back on top of your feet. It can be tough getting back to your routine. And in this podcast, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk about all the ways that you can build your confidence after a breakup. And this is so important because if you're an entrepreneur or a working professional, this breakup could be affecting your performance in your jobs, your businesses, in your personal life, things like that. And we cannot have that happen, even though you've gone through something that's really, really tough. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and get into point number one. But before I do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so we can get more gems like this. So I've already done a podcast on how to overcome grief. And in that podcast, I talk about the 5 stages of grief. The first stage is denial. So it's very hard for you to believe what has happened. The second stage is anger, right? You just get frustrated that this loved one has left you or that this loved one has died, right? And that's me talking more so about the stages of grief as we typically refer to it as someone dying. And then the next stage is bargaining. This is us making a deal. It's something along the lines of, well, if I was just good enough, or if I give my life to God, or if you come back into my life, I'm going to, and then you start making these deals, right? You start making these bargains. And sometimes this happens also when you're in a relationship and it ends. You may actually reach out to the other person and say, hey, if you stay, I promise I'll go to therapy. If you stay, I promise I'll be more open, right? All these deals are being made. And this keeps you in this stuck phase of not being able to get to the end, which is acceptance. So before we get to the acceptance phase, so we just talked about the bargaining phase, and the next phase after that is the depression stage. So this is the stage that a lot of us go through rather quickly. People tend to feel depressed when something in their life that they love is no longer there, okay? Now, I'm gonna use a totally different example from love, and let's just talk about, let's say, materialistic things, right? So let's say you wanted a new car, or let's just say you wanted a new house, right? House buying has kind of been up and down. If you live in South Florida like me, you know that it's always up. Like it's always, people buying. And whenever you find a house that you wanted, and then you find out that it's been put under contract, right? So someone else has bought it, it's under contract, you no longer have a way to get that house. It can be very tough, and it can lead to depression, right? Something that you wanted is now gone. This could also be something like, let's say a job, right? Let's say you apply for a job and you had good hopes, you got good reviews back, right? You thought it was a shoe-in, but when you find out that they went with another candidate, that's where depression starts to set in. So what I'm trying to say is that there's this gap that's created. The gap is where you are versus where you want to be. It's what you want versus what you have. The bigger the gap, the more depressed someone can be. And depression, when it comes to relationships, breakups, divorces, this is typically what happens. The person that you love, or even the idea of just being in a relationship, is no longer available to you. And now that that's gone, this depression starts to set in. And that's why you hit that 4th stage of grief, which is depression. And then the last stage, the 5th stage, is known as acceptance. It's not you liking where you're at, but it's you being able to accept where you're at. And that's 2 totally different things. A lot of people look at acceptance as, well, I have to love where I'm at. I have to love this feeling. I have to love myself, like all this stuff. And that's not the case. I don't love when it rains, but I accept that it's raining. And actually, I also accept that rain has its place on this earth, just like sadness has its place. Anger has its place as well. And I can do a whole nother podcast on that. But nonetheless, these feelings, they're supposed to be there. The sadness that you feel, the anger that you feel, is only present because there was love once there. There's a great saying, it's better to have loved and lost than to have never have loved at all. And this is what acceptance is all about. So with that being said, we're going to get into the first point. And as I always mention, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that way you get more info like this. All right. Man, I can't wait to get into this first point. So this first point is really, really good, and it may sting you a little bit. It may hurt a little bit. And I have to admit, I'm not someone that's here to be your friend. I'm here to be your coach. I'm here to be your mentor. I'm here to be someone that's going to help guide you and get you to the next point of your life. So if some of these points hurt a little bit, it's coming from a place of love, trust me. So the first point to help you to build your confidence after a breakup is that you have to get honest about the problems that was in the relationship. And when I say get honest, I need you to get honest about what you've done in the relationship. And here's why. When you take ownership of the problems that you've taken, the problems that you've created, the problems that you avoided in a relationship, it gives you the ownness, it gives you the roadmap now that you need to be able to overcome these problems and make sure that they're not a reoccurring problem in future relationships. One of the best things that we can do is build a level of trust within us that we can handle and do tough things. If I know that I can handle being vulnerable in a relationship, I would feel more confident going into the next relationship, especially if being vulnerable was something that I lacked in my previous relationship. You see where I'm going with this? Do you understand why it's important for you to own your problems, to get real about your problems? I'll give you another thing too. As an entrepreneur, one of the greatest things that we can do is get real about our strengths, but even more importantly, get real about our weaknesses. And the reason why is because we can now address these weaknesses by either hiring other people, right? Or we can focus on these strengths or these weaknesses rather by buying courses, going to conferences, or even just simply reading books. These things will help to build our skill set. So now that we're a lot more capable with whatever the task is that we're heading into. And it's the same thing again for you as a single person now. So what I would tell you to do is just take a moment and write down some of the issues that you had in your current relationship. And if you have a good friend, even a family member, or even a therapist like myself, take these problems to them and have them talk to you about them. They may actually be able to kind of help you walk through it a little bit more clearer because they will have an objective view of these problems that you just wrote down. So in this first point, you got to get real about the problems. And because you've gotten real with the problems, it helps you now to get real with the solutions. And now that you have real solutions, you can also have real confidence when you go into your next relationship. Point number 2. Now this one is a little bit more, let's say, less painful, less blunt, if you will. Hopefully that first point wasn't too blunt, but this second point, I think you're gonna love it. So the second thing that you can do to help you to build your confidence after a breakup is to start to get to know yourself outside of a relationship. This is a prime opportunity, guys. I know right now it may not feel like it, but in this moment, you have an ability to figure out what it is that you truly want out of life. It could be something as simple as what you like to eat, what you like to do for fun, things like that. Or it can be something more serious. It can be more things like figuring out what spirituality you want to follow, figuring out, let's say, how you want your family to look like, figuring out where you want to live. So many different things that you can do in this space, but you can only do it when you're free, right? When you're not being, let's say, influenced, consumed, people pleasing, right? Like you don't owe it anything to anybody at this moment. Now you have this moment to be true, to be honest. Now that you're honest about yourself, you can go back into the dating world and feel that you're confident in what it is that you're seeking. And you can only have that confidence because you now know what you want. So in this time, it is a great time to also practice self-love. I've seen a lot of people, sometimes women, but I've also had men, when they get into a relationship, they just totally forget about themselves. And when I say forget about themselves, I truly mean they forget about their own happiness. They enter in these relationships with this idea that they're only here to serve the other person. And when they do that, they start to lose a little bit of themselves. And with that, they start to lose some of their confidence. But in this moment, I would dare you to actually start to date yourself. Ask yourself, what would you like to do on a Saturday night, right? Free time, you don't have any obligations. What would you like to do for fun? What do you feel you need at this moment to make you feel loved? These are some of the questions that you should be asking yourself at this time. And honestly, even when you're in a relationship, you should still ask yourself these questions because those individuals in the relationship, so you and the next person, you guys are truly responsible for your own happiness. That was a great thing that I heard Will Smith say. And it's true. In a relationship, you two are responsible for your own happiness. And it just so happened that these two happy people are now in a relationship, entering it as happy people. And when you do that, it's very hard for that relationship to fail. right? Because they both feel that they're individuals that are making conscious decisions to be together. And even while they're together, they do not lose themselves. At this moment, there's a word that goes with this. It's something along the lines of interdependent. It's something along those lines. It's like two dependent people or beings or objects, if you will, coming together. And even though they're together, they're still independent, but it just so happened that they're together. And I believe that word is interdependent. And that's what we want to look for in relationships. Because what I've seen, and it's something that I think a lot of people go through, especially in their first relationships. But what I've seen a lot is people become very codependent, right? Codependent, meaning that their life does not exist outside of this relationship. If this person is down, sad, angry, guess what we are? Down, sad, and angry as well. We don't see ourselves outside of them. And that is something that can be really tough for you as a person that practices codependency, but it can be even tougher for the person who feels like they have a clingy girlfriend or boyfriend. It's not a great feeling. So during this time, make sure that you get more in touch with who you are. And by doing that, you'll have that confidence that you're looking for as you're going into your next relationship. Point number 3, the third and final way to help you to build your confidence after a relationship is to engage your pain instead of avoiding it. This part of your healing journey is a very uncomfortable, but a very natural part of this journey. As I mentioned, as I talked about the 5 stages of grief, one stage that a lot of people enter into and they stay stuck is the denial phase. It's like, no, this hasn't happened, or why did this happen to me, right? Like they haven't really accepted the terms of reality. And at the end, when they're finally able to accept terms of reality, they hit what we call acceptance. So what I want to do real quick is I want to read a passage from a book that I've been reading and sharing with a lot of my clients. And the reason why I want to share it is because it really emphasizes what acceptance looks like. The problem is not the problem. The solution is the problem. The work of the therapist is to help the client to see how excessive control engenders a futile struggle, right? So what I'm trying to say here, and what this is trying to say, is that basically the problem is not the problem because the problem is supposed to be there. But what really creates a problem is when we start to find solutions to try to solve something that is very natural. If I were to try to come up with a solution to stop it from raining outside, I think I would have a big problem. If I were to try to come up with a solution to, let's say, make someone like me, I think I'll have a very big problem. And that problem would be not being authentic to myself, or, as we know, people pleasing. What I love about this is that it helps us to see that pain has its place. It does. Pain, and I should go a little deeper into this. Pain shows us what we care about, because you can only have pain about things that you have values behind. If you don't believe me, I dare you to watch the news for, let's just say, an hour, right? Watch the news for an hour, and I want you to write down all the things that get you upset. By doing that, it'll show you what you deeply care about. So if you're watching the news and you see something going on, let's say in Africa or some other country, something that is, just not right? Just for lack of a better word, it's not right. It's a travesty. It's injustice, if you will. I want you to write down those things and ask yourself, like, why is this something that bothers me? And when you write it down, you're going to come up with a value. That value may be something as simple as common humanity. We all on this earth deserve to be treated as humans, but we all know that doesn't happen to everybody on this earth. This is why pain is needed, because it serves as a compass for the things that you care about, for the values that you have. And that's what we want to do. So during this time, during your breakup, if you feel pain coming around, if you feel sadness coming around, which is, again, one of the steps of grief, I want you to allow it to be there by simply telling yourself that this is okay. Sometimes I even ask my clients a question, and I'll ask you this question as well. I ask them a question and I'll give you the formula. So I ask them, is it okay for you to feel blank, right? So most times it's an uncomfortable feeling as you pursue blank, and it's a value. So I'll give you an example. I will ask, is it okay for you, someone that is recently going through a breakup, is it okay for you to feel this pain as you go and find yourself? If you can say yes to that, you will have a better way of dealing with the pain that you're experiencing than someone who's going to say no to that question. The reason why is because the person that says, no, it's not okay for me to feel this pain, they're gonna do everything they can to avoid it. So that may be doing drugs, drinking, or one may even say even worse, finding someone else to, let's just say, sleep with, for lack of better words, right? Like those things, they don't bring on the happiness or the peace that you're looking for. They actually create more problems. So what I'm talking about in this podcast is just simple ways to help you build your confidence after a breakup, because let's face it, breakups can be hard. But I will tell you this, right? Someone that has obviously, dated several women in the past, right now, happily married man, have a son, have a nice home, right? And I'll tell you this, you will find the one who will help you to forget all of the previous ones that you dated. And if you truly believe that, you too will say yes to that question of it being okay for you to feel this pain as you go and find yourself. So what I'm gonna do real quick is go over the main 3 ways that you can build your confidence after a breakup. So point number 1 that I made is that you need to get honest about the problems that you had in your relationship. And the reason why is because when you get honest about the problems, you can now have honest solutions to move forward. And when you have those honest solutions, it builds the confidence, and more specifically, it builds the trust within yourself to actually handle these problems if they come up in the next relationship. The second point that I made is that you need to get to know yourself outside of the relationship. Okay? This helps you to find out what you truly want. It helps you to let go of any people pleasing that you may have done. And it helps you to actually practice this beautiful thing we know as self-love. By practicing these things, and when you feel better about yourself, you're able to bring a better version of yourself into your new relationship. And then the last point that I stated is that you need to engage in your pain rather than avoiding it. When you truly believe that the problem that you're experiencing now is okay, you won't try all of these crazy, outlandish solutions to try to get rid of something that is very natural. And when I say something that's very natural, I mean the pain that you're experiencing going through a breakup. So this is Coach Wells. I'm a licensed therapist. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next episode.